Hi, Dr. Kimberly White-Smith. Thank you so much for joining us today with the San Diego Urban League. I had a few questions for you today, if you don't mind.
No.
Let's go
Let's
straight
do it.
into it. Great.
Yes.
Teens and technology share a future. I've been saying this for around a decade now, since I wrote a passage for a Pearson textbook saying the exact same thing. What are some things about AI and technology do you feel teens need to understand now so that they're successful later on in their lives?
Sure. I think that technology, and now with the advent of AI, it's even more relevant than it was 10 years ago when you initially wrote your paper on that. These aren't passing trends, right? These aren't about video games. These aren't about, passing time, right? It's woven into all aspects of our communication, how we live, how we learn, how we work. And so the question is not whether or not teens will be involved in technology. It's will they be creators, inventors, as opposed to just consumers.
Absolutely. Thank you. So I was thinking about this since I first saw you at the Golden Pyramid Scholars event a few weeks ago back in May. You stated that it's really important for people of color to see themselves in the spaces that were not originally meant for them, right? You and I understand that, right? But
Yes.
for the viewers and for the listeners potentially,
Sure.
I sort of wanted to hear from your perspective what that means, because they might not understand.
Sure. Historically, the education system, our work environments, they were originally conceptualized at a time where women and people of color were not able to access those institutions, right? Women were not allowed to go on to higher education, secondary education, and people of color were relegated to not having access to even literacy. And so over time, through lots of advocacy channels, that has changed, but the structures remain the same. And so our education calendar still aligns with harvesting, right? It's an agricultural based calendar, right? And so even if you just think of that, so when I say that these systems were not built for us, I meant that literally and historically. It's rooted in fact. And so that is why representation matters. As somebody who grew up in foster care, who had amazing, I had a very unique, amazing experience in foster care. I was taken in by a beautiful older Black couple who really guided my steps and really set me on a trajectory for success. And even though I was emancipated at 16, they ended up passing on. They still built a foundation for me to be able to be successful. And so they were grandparents, right? They were retired. So they didn't need to give back to the community by taking me and my brother in. They didn't need to, but they did. And as a result of that, even though they weren't college educated and no one in our family was college educated, they knew and understood how significant education could be in making a difference in our lives, right? And made sure we had access to high quality education, even with their meager means. And so for me, that was an example, right? They showed up for me. They represented in ways not necessarily, as a professor or as someone who worked in corporate America, but as people who understood how systems worked against us and to make changes so that I could move forward. And so for me, that's what I mean by that. So it's interesting. When I was a younger person, I didn't like to tell people my story because I knew that people saw me differently, right? They either felt sorry for me or they valued what I could bring to the table. They underestimated my abilities and skills. And so over time, I began to see the benefit of allowing people to know who I am and who I represent for two reasons. One, yes, other Black and brown people need to see me as a doctor, as a professor, as a leader, right? As a dean, as an expert in my field. Absolutely. So that they can see like, oh, if she can, I can.
Right.
That's one. But also the folks who do not believe in or invest in people of color need to see me in this space, and they need to understand that we bring value to the table, that we are change makers. They need to understand, who exactly, right, they are closing doors on. Right.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And thank you for bringing in that last point. Closing doors on is definitely a point that sort of segues into the next question, which is a lot of young people of color nowadays may find difficulty looking for jobs or even understanding what career path they should be on.
Mm-hmm.
And for the longest time now, probably since the 2010s, folks have sort of celebrated and even pushed the idea and concept of become an entrepreneur, right? Maybe go to school for something, maybe not go to school for the entire 4 years or longer, or maybe just get an associate's and then build something of your own.
Mm-hmm.
Do you personally believe that to be misguided, or do you believe the path forward for a lot of young people of color is to reinvest in education, lean towards social programs like the San Diego Urban League, or be entrepreneurs, or a mix of all of their own?
So I think the answer to that question kind of addresses all of the things that you've asked me about up to this point.
Right.
So entrepreneurship, technology and AI, and education, right? That those are the three spokes that we've been discussing. And my parents, my dad was a baggage handler at Greyhound. But my mom was the entrepreneur. Right? She was an amazing soul food chef. Self-trained.
Okay.
Right? Generationally trained.
Right.
Right? And so before she took me in, she actually owned her own restaurant, her own cafe called Nana's Cafe. And it was on Central Avenue. So we're talking the late 50s, early 60s.
Right.
Up to the mid 60s. Late 60s. And so on Central Avenue at that time in Los Angeles, it was a vibrant Black community. Think of Harlem Renaissance a la Los Angeles, right? So you're talking jazz, you're talking poets, you're talking writers, you're talking sports folks. And so where her cafe was literally right across from where the Goodyear plant was. Okay. So people would take their breaks, their lunch breaks, and they would come over to Nana's Cafe and they would get together and they would meet and they would talk. She served people like Lou Alcindor, like Cassius Clay, folks we know to be Kareem Abdul-Jabbar now, and Muhammad Ali. And so that was the type of community she built through her entrepreneurship. So entrepreneurship in the Black community is not a new experience.
Right.
Nor does it mean that because we can and have been entrepreneurial doesn't mean that education doesn't play a pivotal role in the future of our lives, right? Because coming back to the idea about AI and technology, if we don't attend to understanding how to sift through all the information, right? Because before it used to be a matter of a gatekeeper to access the information. Now those have been kind of removed. We get too much information. We get misinformation, right? And so it's incumbent upon us to start educating ourselves. It wasn't until I got to the University of California at Berkeley where I even learned about, Black authors, Black playwrights, where I was exposed to Black thinkers, Black inventors, right? Where I learned about Lewis Latimer. My parents, who grew up in the segregated South, right? They shared a little bit of this with me, right? To the extent that they knew,
Right.
right? But having exposure to professors and academics who have actually studied Black culture, right? Or more enmeshed in Black culture, helped me to really understand and really help me build a lens through which I could now evaluate and see the world differently, right? And so I think that education plays a part in helping young people create or develop that lens for themselves, because as they develop their own businesses, as they, go out into the world, they're going to need to understand how to sift through the nonsense and to really be clear about what's important, what's matter, and what's true.
Thank you so much. Last question for you while we still have some time. You mentioned college graduates and young people of color who are leaning towards education and should lean towards that area so that they can have more background knowledge in the classics and in the modern perspective to create new things and to become those entrepreneurs. Because like you said, entrepreneurship is not new to Black people.
Absolutely.
People of color.
And innovation, right, is key.
The fold-up chair, right. So my question for you, and my last question for you is, do you believe the current crop of college graduates and graduating high schoolers even have what it takes to survive in an economy in a world that is dominated by misinformation and AI, right? Not folks like me who are turning 30 this year, right? Who have been able to play around with the technologies and use it in their own work and know what works and know what doesn't. But the folks who have been brought up throughout the entirety of it, right? And this is their world, right? This is the world that they see is changing.
Yes. So I'm a mother, and I have a 22-year-old daughter who experienced all the things.
Right.
I mean, we're talking, COVID, high school, fully online, experiences. The immersion of technology in schools, having laptops, having phones, the whole kit and caboodle. And I will say every day I wake up in amazement. I learn something from her every single day. I learn, so one, she reflects back what I have poured into her. And so in times when I feel frustrated or overwhelmed, she'll stop me and she'll say, "You remember who you are, right?" She'll pull me aside and be like, "What is this?"
Self-reflect.
Yes, be self-reflecting. Think about who you are, what you're doing, what your experiences are, and how you got here. And I'm like, wow, you're really wise. But she lives in a world where she gets inundated by social media, by access to all of these things, completely, orchestrated and invented news cycles.
Right.
And I have to say, I am pleasantly surprised about how she and her peers, they collectively, not in person, but they will get together, in their DMs, they'll have, FaceTime chats. They use the technology to build a community, right? A shared community where they actually go through and they vet each other's ideas and the new information that they're gaining. So I am very optimistic and hopeful about this upcoming generation. Also, something I would like to share with you that I think is really critical and important.
Okay.
More and more of our children are becoming identified with learning differences, right?
Right.
ADHD, autism, dyslexia. And 20 years ago, we celebrated white celebrities and white business folks who had dyslexia. Look at Richard Branson. Look at Cher.
Right.
Look at, all of these folks who are so innovative and creative thinking, as a result of having this learning difference. When Black children experience learning difference in school, they don't get celebrated. You know what happens? They get kicked out of the classroom, they get suspended because they're showing frustration or their behaviors are demonstrating that they're not learning.
Right.
And the teachers and the administrators are misinterpreting their genius as defiance, as behavioral issues. And so this is where we see what we call the school to prison pipeline being built, because at that point, children's behaviors become policed, right? And then they get separated and don't have access to the academic curriculum as a result of the suspensions and expulsions. And so I think it's really important for us to recognize that learning difference is a different way of thinking.
Right.
And at times we forget it is because people are forced to think outside of the box and think differently is where innovation comes from. A lot of people are starting to believe that learning differences are actually a kind of evolution in the way that humans are thinking, right? And we know from neuroscience and neurobiology that folks who have learning differences and then develop strategies to manage those learning differences, right, can begin to excel.
Right.
And so I think it's really important for us. We need to be very careful about how we identify our children. We need to advocate for change and how the education system marginalizes our youth and mislabels them. Because we need to start going back to a system that wasn't created for them, right?
Yeah.
We need to start pushing on that system to recreate itself, because we are stifling our future entrepreneurs, innovators, creative thinkers.
Dr. Kimberly White-Smith, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.